My name is Robert Rice. My grandfather moved from White Earth to the Leech Lake Reservation. He was a pastor of the Episcopal Church, and he was assigned to the Inanigum in Leech Lake. So a lot of my aunties and uncles actually grew up in Leech Lake, but we're all enrollees of White Earth. My father's side of the family, goes all the way back to pre-Columbus. So about there we lose, the oral histories fade. A lot of the information that's on that is recorded oral histories. My family, we would harvest rice. That's one tradition that, we just kind of held on to tightly. I've been harvesting wild rice for 40 years. My father before me was a harvester. My grandfather was. We seem to always be ricing. My whole brothers and we go every year. When my father passed away, we were ricing. I was born September 2nd. They were ricing. Everything seems, what I do now, I have powwow grounds. My specialties are the wild rice soups and other things that I make with wild rice. So, that's always been a part of my life. We've lost a lot of our stories. When my grandfather passed away, I was 7 years old, so not many stories. The only things I can remember about him is him and the old guys sitting on a hill, and old women too, sitting on a hill, and they were winnowing the rice. So they'd have their little baskets, and that rice would be just spinning in this nice circle, and you'd see the dust blown away, and they'd be just laughing, and pretty soon they'd pour the rice out, grab some more, and throw it in their baskets, and they'd go all day just sitting on this hill. And so them type of memories are seeing my grandfather in he'd lay down in the wild rice and clean it. He's pulling out this stuff. It's like, that stuff's itchy. Why would you? He just used to always do that. Just get in there and start cleaning it out. And then they began to experiment with using equipment to process the rice. So I remember them taking the tire off my grandfather's Rambler. I don't know what year it was, like maybe a 1960, 61 old Rambler. And then they would put a belt on that, and then they just put the what do you call it, the rim of the tire on there, and then put the belt up to that and hook the car up to the thrasher, and then they put it in gear, and they put the car up on blocks, and then that's how we were thrashing the rice. So we called it ingenuity. For the last couple of years, we've brought some children up from the Little Earth community to teach them how to wild rice. We joined with Little Earth and brought, teenagers, 12 to 17, to go harvest rice, to teach them a little bit about what we do, how to harvest wild rice, get out of the city for a moment, maybe take a little breather, learn a little bit about wild ricing, and experience some of the hard work, but also the feeling of accomplishment when you're done. And so we've brought some youth up with us. Not us alone, though. There's Little Earth. They did the financing and the stuff. We acted more like guides. We opened up our land for them to camp on. try to cut down on the cost of that. It's that's not cheap to do, to do that, the return, for me, I can knock out quite a bit of rice and it makes it worth it. But for a young man who's first time going out, they're getting, 20% of what I would get in a day. So, practice. You have to do it for a couple of years before you figure out how to do it correctly to get a lot of rice and to make it pay for it, for your trip to go. My grandfather would raise, he had his kids, 5 brothers and sisters, but I thought I had about 20 aunts and uncles. Well, it turned out that a lot of those were my cousins or some people that weren't related that my grandfather just raised because of, orphan or just not, people not being able to care for the children. So my grandfather would take them all in. And that's what he ended up doing a lot in Onigum, on the Leech Lake Reservation. So we have strong ties, my family does, with the Leech Lake Reservation as well. So White Earth, I know that's where I come from, but it seems like Onigum is where, I know more people. A lot of my family is buried out there today. My grandfather moved there in like 1930s, so that was a long time ago. That's where my grandfather's church was. That's where he raised his, my aunties and uncles and cousins and others. So it was kind of neat because I was thinking, boy, I have a lot of aunties and uncles, and wow, and those were the people that would come over to the home when my father had his home and us kids, and we'd have all these family members come and gather. And in the 1950s is when my father came to the Twin Cities area, and it was probably later 50s because he was in the Korean War, and after he got out of the Korean War, then he started looking for work, which he did many things. He was a tree trimmer, a plumber, just whatever he could do, and before he finally ended up at the post office as a federal worker. Then when he was, I guess he would have been 42, he had a massive heart attack. So that ended his career as a postman. So then, when I grew up, my mother and father did the cooking, whoever got home first. But then when my father had the heart attack, he was the cook. So we had lots of wild rice, deer meat. My worst is liver. I remember one particular incident, he was saying, you gotta eat that, there's starving kids in Korea. And I said, well, let's send it to them. That was a mistake. He didn't think it was as funny as I thought it was. But overall, I had a pretty good upbringing. Work was important, that we did our part, whatever it was, whether it was ricing or, I remember I was encouraged to do things, go harvest rice, get a paper out, and he didn't, I wanted to do that. He says, well, go ahead. Well, little did I know that meant that I wouldn't get much help from him. It's your thing. You take care of it. You can do it. So I did. Middle of the winter, 20 below, I went out, did papers. Well, then I ended up getting a second paper out because I loved it so much. So I woke up in the morning before school and did a paper route, and right after school I did a paper route. And then when I was doing that, I ended up cutting people's lawns on my paper route. The next thing I know, I'm shoveling their walks. So not only am I delivering papers, but I'm also shoveling, and so. But that kind of was ingrained in me from how my father was. You know, he worked all the time, and even when he wasn't supposed to, he was helping, somebody, and, I got to move. My dad's first person over there. Well, you can't pick anything up. Well, buddy, that didn't stop. My grandfather, so there was always this spirit of trying to be helpful, and my brothers are much like that. If I need something, I can call on them. They'll take the shirt right off their back and try to be helpful, and that's kind of what I grew up with. And I think that's a big Native American value that was probably really instilled in most Native American people at one time. I had a coffee shop over on the north side called 42nd Avenue Station, and at that time we had music and all this stuff, and we had a great big space, and NACD Justin Heineman called me and asked me to open a coffee shop over here, or would I be interested? And I laughed at him and said no, because I was working 80 hours a week over at the other coffee shop. Where would I find time to work here? Along the line, they just made it impossible for me to say no. And so I ended up opening a coffee shop along with some help financially from family members, and we opened the shop up in 2011. That was February. Well, May of 2011, my other shop got hit by a tornado, and I had some difficulties with the landlord and had to shut that place down. So then I ended up over here. So that's how I ended up over here. It's kind of weird how you end up going in a direction and you end up where you're at, not by your own means. It seems like I was pushed over here.